Hello, welcome and Ramadan Mubarak. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. US brokered talks between Russia and Ukraine end in Geneva today with meaningful progress, but Zelenskyy says political differences still remain. UK authorities look into claims that Epstein's private jet flew in and out of UK airports even after his 2008 conviction. And UEFA appoints an inspector to investigate racism claims after Real Madrid's Champions League match against Benfica. A second day of US brokered talks between Russia and Ukraine have ended in Geneva today in a bid to end the war. US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff said there had been meaningful progress, however, hopes of a breakthrough remained low. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy told reporters there was progress on military aspects, but there are still differences on the political dimensions, including the issue of territory. Meanwhile, Russia's head of delegation says talks were difficult but businesslike. Take a listen.
The talks lasted for 2 days. We had very long discussions yesterday in various formats. Today, we talked about 2 hours. Talks were difficult but businesslike. A new meeting will take place soon. That is all we wanted to say.
Let's go live to Kyiv now to speak to Dr. Oleksandr Merezhko, who heads up the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Ukrainian Parliament. Dr. Oleksandr, good to have you on the show with me today. So we just heard there from Russia, and Russia says the talks are difficult but businesslike and appears intent on extending negotiations. They argue they need more time to secure guarantees for their own Russian interests. How does Ukraine respond to these claims?
Thank you for having me. First of all, nothing has changed, and most likely nothing will change in the future because Putin has not abandoned his previous absolutely absurd and unacceptable for Ukraine demands, including withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from the Donetsk region. It's totally unacceptable for us, and nothing has changed. My prediction that nothing will change in the future.
And it's really interesting because with Moscow demanding land and more time, what is Ukraine willing to compromise on, if anything?
Well, first of all, we have already compromised a lot because when we had agreed to the initial ceasefire proposal, unconditional ceasefire proposal by President Trump, on our part, it has been considerable concession. And we have agreed that there will be ceasefire along the front line. And for us, it's huge. So we expect concessions on the part of Russia, but we don't see any serious concessions. They continue to stick to their absolutely absurd demands. And what is really important always to keep in mind that we are talking about crime of aggression committed by one country, by Russia, against Ukraine. And what kind of concessions we can talk about when the aggressor demands surrender of the victim of the aggression?
Civilian deaths in Ukraine from Russian attacks rose 26% last year. That's according to new data. What does this say about Moscow's strategy and accountability at the moment?
Well, first of all, it means that unfortunately it happened under the presidency of Mr. Trump. And when we see that Russia intensifies, escalates bombardments against civilian infrastructure, continues to kill civilian population, it made the focus of the war against civilian population. So it tells a lot. It means that President Trump's idea about negotiations without ceasefire doesn't work. This kind of negotiations allow Putin to continue to kill Ukrainian civilian population. And I hope that President Trump will reconsider his strategy with regard to Russia in the light of the failure.
So is Trump the real obstacle to peace in Ukraine, do you think?
There is only one obstacle, Putin himself. He doesn't want the war to stop. He even doesn't want a real ceasefire. He is not ready. He doesn't want to negotiate in earnest. He's using negotiations to avoid sanctions from President Trump. He's using negotiations also to continue the war. But President Trump can put an end to the war. We need him to follow through, to deliver on his previous promises and to revert to his initial plan with regard to unconditional ceasefire and to, of course, to impose serious sanctions upon Russia and Russian allies.
And it's really interesting because you say Donald Trump should follow through with sanctions on Russia, sanctions on Russian allies. Why do you think Donald Trump hasn't done this? And why do you think Putin is not under even more pressure?
It's really hard to say, but, maybe President Trump still believes that he can make a deal with Putin, which is, from my perspective at least, it's totally delusional. It's like hoping to make a deal during the Second World War with Hitler. It's absolutely impossible. It's even illogical. It's absurd. What kind of deal you can make with a person who is a pathological liar, who in the past had violated all agreements? So that's why, for me, it's absolutely absurd. And I hope that at some point, President Trump will realize that it's futile to hope to make a deal with Putin.
President Zelenskyy says Trump's approach isn't fair. Is the Ukrainian president trying to get a reaction from Donald Trump? Because we have seen Donald Trump come out and criticize Zelenskyy very publicly, and Zelenskyy is now publicly saying this isn't fair. I mean, what does it mean for the relationship between the two men?
When we're talking about the fact that it's unfair, it means that, again, we should keep in mind the fact that we're talking about serious crime of aggression. And there is an aggressor, a perpetrator of this crime, and there is a victim of the aggression. And you cannot put pressure on the victim of the aggression and to make the victim to make concessions to the aggressor. It's called appeasement. That's why it's not fair. And I hope that, the United States remains our closest ally and closest friend. But sometimes you have to disagree with your friends. You have to stand up for your values, for your interests, even in the face of your friend. But we still remain to be friends, still remain to be partners and close allies.
4 years into the war, with ongoing attacks and heavy casualties, can diplomacy realistically bring an end to the conflict? Or is the gap between Moscow and Kyiv just too wide at the moment?
Unfortunately, diplomacy doesn't work with people like Putin. It's absolutely impossible. We're talking about diplomacy from the position of strength. The most realistic plan for peace in Ukraine is not through diplomacy. It's through maximum pressure put upon Putin by depriving him of oil revenues, which feeds his Russian war machine. That's the only way. So first of all, we should have pressure, maximum pressure put upon Putin and his allies. Then we should have ceasefire. And only after that, it opens a window of opportunity for real, authentic diplomacy.
Dr. Oleksandr Merezhko, always good to have your thoughts and analysis on the show. I appreciate your time. Thank you. Now we're going to have a look at some other stories from around the world today. And Iran and Russia will conduct naval drills in the Sea of Oman on Thursday, following the latest rounds of talks between Tehran and Washington. Iranian media say the aim is to strengthen maritime security and deepen relations between the navies of both countries. Now, DNA recovered from a glove found near the home of Nancy Guthrie does not match any samples in the national database. It's a significant setback for authorities investigating the disappearance of the mother of US TV anchor Savannah Guthrie, who has been missing now for almost 3 weeks. A search is underway for 9 skiers missing in a U.S. avalanche in the mountains of California. A group of 15 were on a trip to Castle Peak in the Tahoe area when a huge storm led to heavy snow. 6 of the party have been rescued with varying injuries and 2 do remain in hospital. The Vatican has said it will not participate in President Trump's Board of Peace initiative. Pope Leo, the first US Pope, was invited to join the board in January. Members will attend the first meeting in Washington on Thursday to discuss Gaza's reconstruction. Now, Philippine Vice President Sara Duterte says she will run for president in 2028. She announced her bid on Wednesday in the wake of being impeached last year. Chris Gilbert has this report.
Sara Duterte is aiming for the Philippines' top office.
Mga kababayan,
my countrymen, let us bring back the courage and devotion for God, for the nation, and for every family and Filipino people. I am Sara Duterte, and I am running as the next president of the Philippines.
The current vice president is embroiled in a bitter feud with current leader Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Now, she's running for his job. She's accusing him of corruption, saying he failed to keep promises during the short-lived alliance that saw them storm to a landslide victory in the 2022 election. They've been caught in a political brawl since, after the vice president was denied favored cabinet portfolios. Since the Philippines only allows one 6-year term and Marcos can't run again, Duterte is now targeting the office for herself. She's the daughter of former President Rodrigo Duterte, who's currently detained in The Hague on murder charges linked to his regime's bloody and brutal war on drugs. Her announcement comes days before her father begins a pre-trial hearing at the International Criminal Court over crimes against humanity.
I offer my life, my strength, and my future in the service of our nation.
She was impeached last year on charges including corruption, plotting to assassinate President Marcos, involvement in extrajudicial killings, and incitement to insurrection and public disorder. The Supreme Court threw out that case over procedural issues, but it may be a bumpy road ahead. Analysts expect the announcement may make the current administration even more hostile towards her. But she has a stranglehold over her home province and is already a household name. Because of this, she's expected to be a frontrunner when the Philippines goes to the polls again in 2 years. Chris Gilbert, Arabiya English.
Police in the UK are looking into private flights to and from London's Stansted Airport following the release of the Epstein files. Former British Prime Minister Gordon Brown has called on UK authorities to urgently re-examine claims that young women were trafficked in and out of the country. Brown claims Epstein's jet marked 90 flights to or from UK airports, 15 of which were after his 2008 sex offence conviction. Let's get the latest from our Washington correspondent, Sarah Firth. Sarah, great to have you on the show. So these files were, of course, released in the US. We have spoken about them before, but they're triggering this fresh scrutiny in Britain. What in this material is prompting police in the UK to take a closer look at Epstein's activities after the latest file was released by the Justice Department?
Yes, Leigh-Ann, we're seeing a continuation of these consequences as a result of what the Department of Justice had said it is the last drop of Epstein files. More than 3 million documents. And what has prompted these fresh investigations, not just here in the United States, but as you said, across the Atlantic in Britain, is some of the passenger manifests, some details of flights that Jeffrey Epstein's private jet that was dubbed the Lolita Express appeared to have taken into the UK, in some cases then transferring to the United States. Now, British police have said they are investigating those fresh claims that those flights were potentially used to traffic some girls and women. Now, you mentioned the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown there. He has written about this, saying that he believed that some of those flights were used for exactly those reasons, for Epstein to be transferring those girls from, quote, Latvia, Lithuania and Russia, flying girls in, using, for example, Stansted Airport, which is just outside of London in Essex. So you now have confirmation. There are 4 separate British police forces that are now looking into these allegations and claims to see if further investigation will be needed.
And Sarah, do the documents shed any light on who may have enabled or facilitated Epstein's travel and movements internationally? Because I think these are the big questions. If the police are investigating this in the UK, who will be held account? What more do we know?
Yes, you're absolutely right, Leigh-Ann. That is the major question. Are there more people who need to be held accountable? Is there a wider network at play here? Some groups, including the United Nations, are indicating they think that, yes, there is. Look, in the latest documents, there's nothing conclusive that has come forward yet. But as we said, it's prompted this fresh look on both sides of the Atlantic and indeed around the world in various countries at who might have been potentially facilitating Jeffrey Epstein and his movement and the abuse of the women and girls. Now, if you look at some of the flight logistics mentioned in this latest drop, we've heard again former Prime Minister Gordon Brown writing saying this Department of Justice drop of the files shows that there is some 90+ flights that came into UK airports as a Jeffrey Epstein's jet. And it says that 15 of those were after Jeffrey Epstein's 2008 conviction. Now, importantly, you've had Stansted Airport come back. They have said private aircraft operate through fixed base operators, not through the main airport. They follow, they say, regulatory requirements. Border Force carries out the immigration and customs checks. You've also had an Essex police spokesman saying they are assessing the information from that Department of Justice release. As you said, Leigh-Ann, some of the big questions that the investigators are going to be looking at here is, did authorities miss something at the time when those regulations should have been in place, when checks should have been carried out? Was something missed that they should have seen? So this is no longer just about who knew what, it's whether something critical was missed at the time by the authorities involved. And so you've got this renewed push and these fresh sets of eyes from the police force in the UK going into the details of this to see whether there will potentially be further legal consequences here.
And Sarah, UN experts are now talking about evidence of a possible global criminal enterprise. Does what's been released in Washington suggest Epstein's network was far wider, far more organized than maybe anyone could have previously understood?
Yes, you know, here in Washington, we've had the survivors who've really been at the center of this push for scrutiny and release by the Department of Justice for these Epstein files. It was a really long fight that they had just to get to this point where the Department of Justice did say they've released all the files. And in the wake of that, they've come out and said, look, there are still redactions. There are millions of pages. But if you look through, Leigh-Ann, and it's up on for public access, there are blacked out pages. The survivors are absolutely clear that they think there are still powerful individuals who are not being named and not being held accountable. And they say simply that will not be justice if the silence around that remains. The warning from the UN expert panel, exactly that the document suggests the existence of a global criminal enterprise. Let me read you a bit of what the panel said, because it's a pretty bleak, stark statement. They said, so grave is the scale, nature, and systematic character and transnational reach of these atrocities against women and girls that a number of them may reasonably meet the legal threshold for crimes against humanity. It doesn't get much more of a stark warning than that from the UN. And as a result of the severity of the allegations and the potential involvement of transnational networks, you've seen investigations being launched everywhere, from right here in the United States to across the Atlantic in the United Kingdom.
And Sarah, I just want to move on to another topic now. What exactly is this dispute happening in the US between Stephen Colbert and his network? It's sort of gaining lots of traction.
It is. So many eyes on this, and that's exactly what we're told the Trump administration did not want, because Stephen Colbert, the late night host on CBS, has come out and said he was not allowed to air an interview that he had done with a Democratic representative who was running for Senate. He said that the network, because of a rule that the regulatory body here in the US has brought in and changed slightly, he would have been required to show other candidates as well. But take a listen to what he had to say, aiming these words, remember, at his own network.
You know who is not one of my guests tonight? That's Texas State Representative James Tallarico. He was supposed to be here, but we were told in no uncertain terms by our network's lawyers, who called us directly, that we could not have him on the broadcast. Then I was told in some uncertain terms that not only could I not have him on, I could not mention me not having him on. And because my network clearly doesn't want us to talk about this, let's talk about this.
So, Sarah, let's...
So he went on after that to say, Leigh-Ann, that this is about the equal access rule, right? So because you've got this Democrat running for Senate in November, the rules now, it didn't used to apply to late night talk shows, but now the head of that board, the FCC, is thinking about extending it to late night talk shows. And as a result, the network's lawyers felt that potentially he could be in breach of any future change to the regulations. That clip's about the politest bit we are able to air, but he goes on to speak in the way that only Stephen Colbert can. He's known for being very outspoken, challenging the Trump administration on many of its decisions around the media. I do just want to tell you, though, Leigh-Ann, the only Democrat on the 5-person board of the FCC came out and said that there were concerns, and she felt it was a troubling example of corporate capitulation. So some harsh words all round there for CBS, not least from its own host of Stephen Colbert's late night show.
But Sarah, it did manage to air on YouTube, didn't it? So if you do want to watch that interview, it is available, but it's just not available on the major network. And that's also another argument.
Yes, and Stephen Colbert says in the monologue that he gives explaining this, that he's going to be putting it up on YouTube. Now, importantly, those types of platforms, they don't fall under the FCC's regulatory reach, so it's able to be put up without following that equal access rule. Important to point out to viewers, though, as of right now, the FCC hasn't actually changed the rules around what can be aired on late-night talk shows, but just the suggestion that they might be changing the rules has prompted the network CBS to, with the lawyers, look at that, and Stephen Colbert telling the audience, apparently deciding it was not right to air that interview. Also, Stephen Colbert will be leaving the network in May later this year. So, it's an interesting time for him to be on air, facing these challenges and possible changes around what media can broadcast in the age of the Trump administration.
Yeah, and he's leaving it all on the table, isn't he, Sarah, before he leaves? And is this part of a wider pattern? And are tensions between broadcasters and their star presenters becoming more common under the Trump administration? Because we even see Hollywood stars really getting political these days.
Yes, and I mean, it's interesting that you had this interview with James Talarico causing so much tension here, because as I said, he was told, Stephen Colbert, he couldn't air this on his platform. It's now gone up on YouTube. And of course, as a result of the controversy around this, has got a huge amount of eyeballs on it. Now, Stephen Colbert is not the first time that he's come up against challenges from his network, from the Trump administration. We know the Trump administration has been urging that body, the FCC, to relook at rules around what media are allowed to broadcast, particularly when it comes to election time. The Trump administration, of course, has taken on many times what they call the mainstream media bias, fake news media. That's the allegation that is often levied at us journalists here in the United States. But the FCC, under the chair, Brendan Carr, has been seen as bending towards possibly following the Trump administration's advice on some of these stricter rulings. And that has come in for very sharp criticism, as I said, from even some of the Democrat members of the FCC board itself. So there is a huge amount of scrutiny around the possible changes to rules. But yeah, Leigh-Ann, Stephen Colbert coming out swinging, airing that, saying, you know, his network didn't want to air it. They didn't even want him to speak about it, but clearly he felt that rule could be ignored, and speak about it he did. And viewers who are interested, you couldn't see it on his late night show, but it did go up on his YouTube page afterwards.
Sarah Firth, no fake news here. Thank you so much. Let's take a look at the top of business news now. UK inflation dropped to 3% in the year to January, falling from 3.4% the previous month. Today's data from the ONS means an interest rate cut is more likely next month, with traders predicting the Bank of England will bring its base interest rate down to 3.5% on the 19th of March. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg will give testimony at the social media addiction trial in California today. Zuckerberg, who runs Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, will address the safety of his platforms after thousands of American families claimed they were deliberately designed to make young users addicted. Turning to all the sports news now, and Pakistan has secured a spot in the Super 8's win over Namibia. They are the final team to enter the T20 World Cup. Pakistan scored an easy 102, while Namibia's batting campaign collapsed after scoring 97 runs in just 17 overs. Ukrainian officials say they will boycott next month's Paralympics as Russian athletes are allowed to compete under their own flag. The move by the IPC comes after Russia was twice banned from the Games, once in 2016 over doping, and then in 2022 after the invasion of Ukraine. And this is a fabulous story. Earlier today, a husky gate crashed the cross-country skiing women's team sprint qualifying race at the Milan Cortina Olympics. It ran across the line ahead of the skiers before officials eventually caught up with it. What a beautiful dog. UEFA has appointed an ethics and disciplinary inspector after allegations over racism directed at Real Madrid forward Vinicius Jr. The Champions League match against Benfica was stopped for 11 minutes after Vinicius claimed a racist slur had been made towards him. The incident supposedly took place after Vinicius celebrated his goal in front of rival fans. In a post-match interview, Benfica boss Jose Mourinho was asked if Vinicius incited the crowd. Here's what he had to say.
In the world of football and what happens on the pitch, I always try to maintain a certain balance. I don't want to say that Vinicius is a liar and Prestiani is an incredible kid. I didn't mean that, and I wouldn't say that. Alvaro has opted for a different perspective. Kylian has opted for a different perspective. I don't want to get involved in that. The only thing I'm saying is that this happens in so many stadiums with the same problem every time. So there really is something wrong. I just said to Vinicius, you scored an extraordinary goal, something out of this world. So why are you celebrating like that?
Here to tell us more about the match is chair of the People's FA and former Chelsea footballer, Mickey Ambrose. Mickey, great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining me. So we just heard, great. So we just heard there from the Benfica boss, Jose Mourinho, claimed incidents seem to follow Vinicius Jr. wherever he plays football. It happens in every stadium, always, is what Mourinho says. Do you think he has a valid point at all?
No, I don't think he has a valid point, because I remember Jose Mourinho, when he used to celebrate on the touchline at Chelsea, in front of the crowd and in front of other managers. So I'm really very disappointed by the comments he's made. I understand there's been about 16 games where Vinicius has been racially abused. And obviously what's happened recently is terrible for the game. So I disagree with Jose's deduction of what happened. I remember Ian Wright scoring goals, and the language that was used against Ian Wright scoring goals at the away end, he actually once said to a police officer, "Can you arrest that man?" because of the language that was used. So I don't agree with what Jose said. I think it's a shocking incident, once again, that has tainted the beautiful game.
And Benfica's Gianluca Prestiani denies making racist comments and criticises the anti-racism protocol that was put in place. How will UEFA ensure the investigation is impartial and it's also credible?
Well, it's very odd, isn't it, how you always get the club, or the perpetrating club, so to speak, who use an excuse, say it didn't happen. It must have happened, okay? The only way we can actually find out is when UEFA investigate. And how they investigate it is twofold. First of all, they see all the footage, the CCTV footage, as much as there's so many cameras around the ground. And obviously they'll have to employ a lip reader and to ascertain and also look at witnesses, because Mbappe says that the word monkey was aimed at the player 4 or 5 times. So they would look at employing a lip reader to ascertain whether that was said or not. So it's very easy. I always find it very condescending when a situation happens on your own doorstep and you're sort of saying it didn't happen. Well, something must have happened, because the player wouldn't have reacted in that way. And UEFA and FIFA, in particular UEFA in this case, used their rule, which is the referee made the sign, and the players went off the pitch. I was disappointed that there was no PA announcements, or when we have VAR, referee always explains to the audience, what's going on, if it's a penalty or not. So maybe they should have used some type of PA announcement or put something on the big screen to explain what was happening. But the shocking state of football is this has been going on for a long time. Remember when Rashford and Saka missed the penalties for England, the abuse they got online is shocking because of technology. But when a professional footballer is abusing a fellow player, that is absolutely disgraceful. We had it in the UK when John Terry allegedly called Anton Ferdinand a game in 2011. There was a criminal investigation where he was found not guilty, John Terry, but the FA banned him and fined him £200,000. So, it's very easy for the clubs to say, oh, it didn't happen. Something must have happened. But to get to the bottom of it, we need to check the CCTV cameras and also get a lip reader in to ascertain what was said. Because remember, he pulled his jersey up in front of him as well. So why would you do that?
Yeah, there's so many questions to be answered, Mickey. But Mickey, throughout my journalism career, I followed a lot of football, and I remember interviewing Kick It Out many years ago, maybe 10 years ago or so, about racism in football. And we've just been speaking about some of those cases regarding Rio Ferdinand and so on. Do you think that football is getting any better at all at being kinder to each other on the pitch? Do you think the fans are improving? Or do you still think that this is a real problem that needs concrete action? Like if the player did speak to Vinicius Jr. the way they said he did, should he face serious consequences? Should he be banned? Should he be fined? Is football being tough enough?
Well, this has been going on for many years in terms of fans racially abusing players. I remember when I got thrown a banana at me, I pretended to peel it and eat it, and I got fined by the FA for inciting crowd behaviour, believe it or not. So, footballers, black footballers, people of colour have to put up with a lot of this. And this has been going a long time. I think there has been improvement with sort of the FIFA rules and UEFA. However, you cannot stop a fan, for example, coming to a football stadium to shout what he or her wants to shout. It's when you identify them on CCTV and then you give them the punishment. But when it's actually happening on the pitch, which seems to be very rare, I would say, I've not heard of a lot of cases where players are actually using certain language against fellow players, professional players. So when it happens on the pitch, there's something quite wrong with the education of that player. The club Benfica obviously want to keep their name. They mentioned the fact about Eusebio being a black player, and when you remember there are black players in the Benfica team, and for me, I met Eusebio, and as you know, I was good friends with the late Pele. So for me, you don't use Eusebio as they say, we had a black player previously, so it doesn't happen. That's absolutely rubbish what Jose Mourinho is talking about. Absolute rubbish. The fact is, something did happen. He alerted the referee. He didn't lose his temper. He wasn't shouting or whatever. And even if it happened to him, many times, it doesn't mean there's, he can celebrate whichever end he wants to celebrate. Okay, but you do it in a certain way. So in my opinion, there has been some progress. I'll give you an example about taking the knee before kickoff. Yeah. Kick it out. I know the chairman very well. We've had kick races about football going on for years. Players wearing T-shirts, warming up, kick it out, kick it out. Where's it got us? Absolutely nowhere, because it's the people that are in charge of the game, the sporting governing bodies like FIFA and UEFA. You've got the president of FIFA handing a peace prize to, and I believe, in my opinion, the president of the United States, who I think is a racist, and we saw quite recently with the post he posted regarding Barack and Michelle Obama of pictures of apes. I mean, it's absolutely disgraceful. Kissing the feet of people just to get on their side is absolutely wrong. And I'm diversifying. But in answer to your question, I think there has been an improvement. I think if the player is found guilty, then he needs to suffer the consequences. We don't want no 50,000 euros fine, which is what we heard had previously when players were abused. I think it's got Bulgaria. We need some firm action, and the messages need to be sent home to these players, and they need to go on some type of cultural educational course, because there's racism in society. Whether you're black, white, Irish, Lithuanian, Polish, South African, there is racism, sexism and homophobia. When you're a victim of that, it's very hurtful. When I was spat at the age of 5, holding the hand of my late brother who was 6, going to a primary school, and a car went past and called me a black so-and-so, and I could always see the saliva on my duffel coat, I'll always remember that. But I didn't grow up hating white people, So these certain people, there's a certain type of person who want to be sexist, want to be homophobic and so on, and they need to be dealt with. So the authorities have to act, get all the evidence. It's all right, everyone's jumping on the bandwagon. The club are saying they've got footage of Mbappe not being near the player. Mbappe saying he heard the M word, the word being said 5 times. So we need to get the evidence. There's no point. You're not guilty until you're not proven guilty. You have to be proven guilty. So let's wait for the evidence and let's see how they act.
And I must say, Mickey, Trump always says that he's not racist, regarding also that Obama footage that came out. So we must just bear that in mind. Donald Trump claims he's not racist. But as you did say to me, Mickey, there's so many questions that do remain unanswered. And let's hope the investigation can shine more light on the incident that happened on the football pitch. But Mickey Ambrose, really good to get your point of view. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me again. Thank you.
A reminder of our top stories. US brokered talks between Russia and Ukraine end in Geneva today with meaningful progress, but Zelenskyy says political differences still remain. UK authorities look into claims that Epstein's private jet flew in and out of UK airports even after his 2008 conviction. And UEFA appoint an inspector to investigate racism claims after Real Madrid's Champions League match against Benfica. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Of course, follow us on X. We'll be back in a couple of hours with W News Extra. Goodbye and Ramadan Kareem.